Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the UCM podcast. This is Dr. Bill Davis, your host for today's episode. And at UCM, of course, we are all about helping you grow your upper cervical practice. You can learn more about us at ucmgrow.com. And we are here with an incredible guest I'm very excited to have on the podcast. And it's Dr. Russell Friedman. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Friedman.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Thanks for having me.
Very excited to have you here. So, for anybody out there that doesn't know you, Doc, I'd love for you to just share a little bit about your background, introduce yourself to our audience.
Sure. I'll start with my family real quick, just my background. I'm a dad. I've got two daughters. One of them is in chiropractic. She works in the office with me. Sometimes I feel like I'm working for her. The way that there's like this big flip that happens. My son-in-law is here, and so we've been doing chiropractic for a while, and the whole thing that really got me into it is back in Florida. I have a degree in mechanical engineering, and I just decided that I didn't want to do that anymore. Okay, It was time to move on. It seems to be that's my path with a lot of things is moving on, But I went into a restaurant business, and I moved on from that. And a friend of mine just said, hey, why don't you become a chiropractor? I had no idea what I wanted to do. Off I went to chiropractic school, and in second quarter, Dr. Grostic was teaching me philosophy. Awesome. And on the last day of the class, he threw up some nasiums and some vertexes and some lines, and he started talking about, chiropractic and from his perspective and his family's perspective, of course, So it was the first time there was a light bulb for me that went on because of my mechanical engineering background. And, you don't go to mechanical engineering school to learn mechanical engineering. You are a mechanical engineer, and you learn the laws and the theory, how to do stuff. Right. It's in the blood, it's in the juice already. So, he just turned me on, and I started a Grostic. There was a Grostic club, had about 3 people in it, and it grew to 100 people at one time.
Wow.
Dr. Sid was pushing upper cervical work, and that's just the way it was. And I was in to me that they were like glory days with him, And I got into orthospinology, and I got exposed to some great biomechanics and understanding how, the C0, C1, C2 subluxation complex works, and how to get in there and make changes into the brainstem. And I loved it. And I had a guy kind of tap me on the shoulder one day, and it was Dr. Bob Brooks. Okay. And, that guy, life's changed when he's around. And he turned me on. I became a protege. I used to tell him when we go to the restaurant, whatever you're eating, I'm eating because I want to be just like you, kind of thing. So, he was a great friend of mine, and he was a mentor to me in many different ways. And I went on from being board certified in orthospinology to get board certified in NUCA. I was on the board. I was on the research, the NUCRA board. And I was teaching. And, just the way it's kind of like my history is stuff just came along. And I had Dr. Gregory's first posture IQ in my office. I was like a shrine to me, and, and I remember looking, and this was a pivotal point for me. I was board certified and all kinds of stuff. It was a pivotal point. And I looked at somebody, and, this is a long conversation, but the questions were, I was great with getting rid of somebody's trigeminal neuralgia, but I had some difficulty getting rid of somebody's sciatic pain. I was incredible about taking care of the brainstem and all kinds of stuff in the and the nervous system there, but I had trouble taking care of some musculoskeletal stuff down below. And I looked down below on my anatometer, and the rotation of the atlas was anterior and the rotation of the pelvis was posterior. And mechanical engineering degree brain said, big things move little things. So I understood for the first time where Clarence Gonstead was coming from a foundational theory. And I started measuring. What happened was I started measuring where the head was, where the neck was, where the spine was, where the pelvis was for about 5-6 years. And I started seeing patterns of the way that the human body broke down. Okay. And I, with my bone out of place mentality, says, I'm going to lift it up. Okay. And then somebody got me exposed to some fascial stuff and the anatomy trains and all this stuff. And I started saying, oh, this is like this is cool. The bones are out of place, but it's the muscles that are moving them. Okay. And they're like piano lines down there, and I can touch spots up on the neck and adjust those places and start releasing, and from an anterior atlas, a posterior pelvis, by setting it up in a certain different relationship on patient placement. Mm. And I started experimenting with that stuff, and I started watching, and over, let's make a long story short, over 10 years, the human body is complicated, right? Over the past 12 years, I've been doing this for 29 years, 15 years at vector-based upper cervical work, and then let's call it almost another 15 years of, banging my head against the wall and trying to figure out literally how the body works, because it's complicated, and we've made it, I hate to say it, but we've made it simple. Why do we make it simple? Because that's the way we can understand it. I'm in that crew. I'm a human. That's the way we get it, and that's the way we can communicate it. But what I found is that we're not just a bone out of place. We're not just a fascial system, and these things are lines, and pull them so the anatomy trains don't have it right. You're gonna love this, because it was like the dawned on me. It's the nervous system that's running the whole show. And we go, oh yeah, of course it is, and that's what I affect. But there's a relationship between everybody's full posture, from head to neck to shoulders to spine and legs, and it gets damaged. And and there's accidents and injuries, as Dr. Brooks said, and there's accidents, injuries, and what does it do? It compensates. So how does it compensate? It compensates by putting the head up on center, right? Mm-hmm. So how does it do that? Through the writing reflex. So I started looking, and I said, wait a second, up here is the compensation. I need to go down there. So I started doing full spine work. No, I'm kidding. I didn't. There you go. Good. Well, to see if you were captivated. But I started looking at how I could create the relationship of what's going down there and going up here. And then now I've got structure and function together, right? And then from, fast forward all the way through, I started measuring the legs, and I started looking at the body, how it's been damaged, how it compensates. And I've developed from Dr. Gregory's posture IQ, anatometer, is I've made this digital machine called a posture IQ. And people stand on it, and within moments, I can look at somebody's not just structure and say, oh, you're here, and you're here, and you're here, and you're here, but I could say, hey, I can look at their energetic status of the way that the nervous system is handling that. Okay, so it was cool. Like I said, somebody's got, like Larry Arbeitman, we'll talk about him. He has a high 4, anterior 4.5. I think it's 4.5 on the left-hand side adjustment, right? But what that 4.5 represents is something. What does it mean that its atlas is rotated? So the body, these are all things that I have sought to understand, is looking at the way the body is structurally been made, how it damaged, and how it reacts to it, and then its energetic capacity to be able to hold that misalignment. And I saw over a whole bunch of time is I see this crazy nervous system that gets traumatized, and it locks down. And it locks down off center, and it twists and it turns. And my purpose has been to try to understand that, to understand it, not just go to see it, but to understand it. So now I understand it to some level. I've been looking at patterns. I see what's normal as a pattern. We know what textbook normal is, but do we know how the body actually compensates correctly in damage? No, we don't. We don't learn that. We don't understand that. Mm-hmm. So I want to know that. I want to know how it's compensating, because I want to be able to put the body back, not back to textbook. I want to put the body back to an energetic value that says I can handle that. So I went from a position of adjusting to kind of move a plane line and push an atlas into place. That to me was suppressing, is to trying to understand what the human body, what it needs. Okay. And I do that through this machine. As I look at the machine and I see the way that the body is holding itself, no different than the way you would hold somebody and you would look at them and say, hey, hold this brick or carry this suitcase for me. And you come back and they're dragging it on the floor and they're dripping sweat, right? They didn't do so well. So you can measure those parameters and those stages of the way that the body has been damaged, and it's structurally, and it's compensating, and it's energetically. And then I got, that this place is, I understand this thing. and I'm going to start understanding. So now I got to figure out where up here is how to change that, and how to place that. And what kind of force that it needs, and the way to do that. And it's endless. And like I said, it's complicated. It's so complicated, but it's so freaking interesting, is that you start, it's like that guy, what is it, Bill Nye's or something like that, the science guy,
Right.
How does it work? How does the human nervous system actually work under problems, under trauma, and how does it react, and what are those normals? Because as chiropractors, and especially upper cervical chiropractors, that's a whole other conversation of why it's got to be here, but it's to understand how to release that. That's our job, and to create energetic, less stress on the human body, because it's just one giant battery doing everything. And posture sucks it dry. I mean, more than anything. I mean, we are number one when it comes to degenerative disease. We can take care of that. Number one, if we would get into the way I see it is, if we can get into a global looking system and a live system, because it's alive, and we don't look at it really as alive, we look at it as a bone out of place concept, is how do we look at it as alive? Because that's what we have to work with. You push, it pushes back sometimes, it reacts. So I think we could do that. We affect the brainstem a whole lot more.
So, you mentioned how complicated all this is, right? That it's something that is, there's so many different things that are happening within the body and all the compensations and everything that's happening with it. So I'd love to hear, how, obviously, it's not just, we don't seek to just understand these things just to understand them. We're seeking to understand this in order to help people, right? In order to make an impact in our communities, an impact in people's lives. And so I'd love to hear how you are, how do you communicate these concepts to patients? What are some of the things that you have learned that are effective to help, the average person to understand what's going on with their body, and how what you're doing is making an impact on them?
Yeah. That's a really funny question, because I'm such a detailed person. Oh, there you are.
Okay. Oh, I lost you for a minute there. Go ahead and answer that question again. Oh, we're freezing up.
I'm back. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. Is there anything going on with your internet on your side? No. Can you see? No?
No.
Mine looks fine. All right, let's just try it again. Go ahead and answer that question again. We'll edit this out later.
So I'm a person that I want to explain what I'm doing so they can get the nuts and bolts. And I found that that people have difficulty with that.
Yeah.
Right? They have difficulty with that.
Sure.
And everybody is different. So, you have somebody walk in their office and you can tell, very shortly after you've been doing this long enough, is who wants to be detailed and who just wants to feel better. Right.
Right.
That's just the way it works, So I try to meet patients where they are, I try not to tell them too much anymore. The bottom line is, Bill, here's the beauty of this, is that we help so many people that if we just help them, and if we just jumped on the chair and tell them to chant 3 words, they would do it, okay? Because they feel better, right? Sorry, bud.
Man, I don't know what's going on with this, but
I don't know.
I lost you here for a minute. There we go.
No.
All right, well, let's try to keep going. Yeah.
So I try to meet people where they are, but at the same time, I found that the best sales and the best way to get people to really understand what you're doing is that you just give them what they want, which is what they want to feel good. And, and it's hard, because as chiropractors, that's a difficulty. And it's still a bone of contention for me, because I want them to really understand what we do. See, and that annoys me sometimes, but that's my issue. So I got to live with that,
Right.
So at the end of the day, they just keep coming back. Okay. And they keep coming back. I used to tell them and force them into a certain type of care. And why haven't you been here? And this is the way I do things and all this kind of stuff. And you let people do what they want to do, and you explain, and they hear it from your heart, man, they hear it from your heart, then, and you make them feel better. They're patients forever, and they tell their friends, because I do zero marketing. And the only patients, the way I get somebody is that somebody told them.
Right. Right. So the results are the most important part for them to understand what's going on.
Well, that's my story, right? Somebody
Yeah.
else, somebody else eats at McDonald's. I don't do that, right? So
right. Yeah. So, but that's, it's, I think it's important though, what you said too at the beginning of that conversation is that people are different, right? And being able to understand that and saying, hey, this is a different personality type than this person, and they may need to be communicated with differently, right? If you're trying to communicate with everyone the same way that you want to be communicated with, then you're doing a disservice to them, right? That that's not going to resonate with everyone, right? There's going to be some people that want the details, right? They want to know what is going on, but a lot of people don't.
I usually ask.
Yeah.
The clue for me was, people take their shoes off when they stand on the posture IQ, and at the end, and we're done, and I post check them, and they go and they sit in the room. I'm talking to them about what happened, and they're putting their shoes on. That's the indicator they're not interested in what you got to say, So so you got to pay attention to your people, right?
So if someone's real analytical, they don't put their shoes on, they're listening to you?
They listen, and they engage, and they ask questions. And that's not that they want to listen to you, is that they're on the same level. They want to hear your vibe, right? They're
Gotcha.
just, you're the jazz station, and they're dialed into jazz right now. And someone else wants to be metal, then that's what they do,
Right,
I
right.
don't take it offensively. It's actually, sometimes it's a great thing. Afterwards, I go, great, I didn't have to say that whole story again,
Right. So if someone's real direct and just wants the high level stuff, they're putting on their shoes. They're getting ready to move on to the next thing.
And you know what? Nobody is ever going to love it as much as you.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a handful of to me, the patients that you could just name, that you know them already, man. You know that most of my people they're never going anywhere, but there's a select few that they're like family. I mean, and there's a lot of that, but there's like your personal family, those are the ones that they want to hear what you have to say, and you have conversations generally. Somebody said to me last week, I said, and that's the chiropractic of it, and they said, you're more than a chiropractor. So my big thing is not really just talking about the misalignment and how it stresses their body, but how it interferes with their relationship with universal intelligence, man, and how to take care of yourself. I'm really about that message. I think I'm preaching more about tapping into the indicators that the body has, God put these things inside us. They're indicators. They're not our enemies. They're our friend. And if we listen to them, I have an expression that I taught my kids, and that God will always give you a lot of taps before he gives you the foot, so, right. So, if you could communicate to people that they start paying attention to this, and if they start doing something that's productive from an inside out point of view, rather than an outside in, whether it's pills, I did this, I did that, I did this, I mean, you can't stop your patients from doing those things, but you can keep educating them, not really in an academic way, but in a relationship that they already have. I'm in the South, so I'm the people that I talk with are very connected that way. So they love the conversations. Sometimes I got to kick them out, man. I can't. They don't want to. They want to get adjusted, but they want to talk about the good stuff.
Right.
And that's what I like, and that's what resonates with me. So I attract people like that.
Yeah, and you mentioned a few times, and I'd love to have you share a few of some of your favorite patient stories from over the years of people that you've been able to help and take care of, and just really see their lives change. I'd love to hear some of those stories.
Yeah, for sure. Probably my coolest thing that ever happened. It happened when I was doing NUCA work, straight vector based work. Okay. Mm-hmm. And the gentleman came in, and he's done a video on it. It's on our website. But he was in a wheelchair. He was in a power chair. And he I mean, I don't remember all the exact details of why this was going on, but he had been to the top hospitals, traveled. His family took him. He had 2 children. Him and his wife. His parents would take them to many different clinics throughout the country to find out why he was unable to walk. Okay, he didn't have like paralysis, couldn't walk. Okay, could not support his body or anything. Well, he got some care, and he before he left, he went back to work. He moved up north. Okay, he pursued his dreams, and he was jogging. Jogging. Wow. Yeah. I had a guy came in with MS, and he had lost his vision about 3 days before, and so it wasn't something that it was genetic, or he had an injury or anything. He had a degenerative disease. There was some pressure, whether it was plaque or pressure or whatnot. To me, it was pressure because of it moved it. But anyway, I remember him laying him on the leg check table and putting my hands over his head like this, and his face, he was laying supine, raising, and he grabbed my hand. Huh. So, those are things that I remember. I've had, my favorite patients, though, are, now that most important to me are the grandmas that bake me stuff during Christmas, Hanukkah time, and bring me stuff because, really, I was doctoring to them, not just in their physical way, but I doctored them in things that else they needed. And those, to me, right now in my career, are the most cherished. So I like those the best. It's easy to take care of people and their physical stuff these days. It's true. I mean, it's just easy for me. I don't have stress with that. I have stress with, me being a better person and trying to really love on patients and switch off that gearhead brain of mine that won't shut up and wants to talk about postural listings and numbers and twists and what they mean and everything, is to exit out of that a little bit more and get into more, the loving, hugging and being connected with people. That's really what my practice is about now over the past probably 5 years, because I reached a place in my technical level that I felt that I was seeking for all along. I was satiated, and I am satiated, with that. So I was able to build or expand the other side of my, my other side of my brain, and those are the things that I enjoy in my practice most right now. So.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier that your daughter and your son-in-law are now practicing with you, and I'd love to hear more about that. What was that something that your daughter wanted to do all along? Did she decided to go into this later in life? And what's it been like practicing with your daughter and your son-in-law?
Ooh, that's like an 18-hour CE seminar. What are you talking? Right? Family and practice.
Yeah.
So, I was a one-man show for a long time. And there's reasons for that, because I'm a one-man show, so that's the way I was, which I was just talking about, and she came into the practice, and it was very interesting because I just expected her to be an upper cervical person and all these kind of things. And she was never really interested in chiropractic. I mean, they got adjusted. It was part of her life. It was a huge thing. Actually, just to backtrack, one of the stories is when she was 3 years old is when we moved up here. She started projectile vomiting. And there was a guy that lived in my condo complex, and he was a Dr. Sweat AO doctor. And he was, I was in second quarter, the same time Grostic, the same exact time, all that. It was like, it was like the heavens, everything came together on that, It was divine providence. And we went to his office, and she did film, and she got better. She got better, a lot better. So I naturally just went ahead into that kind of stuff. And so she's been, and my whole family has always been, like my kids have never been to, when they grew up, they never went medical doctors. They just didn't do that. Okay. It was like, that was another planet for me. You know,
Right.
I am, very based in chiropractic and taking care of yourself, and that the Psalm 46:10, be still and know that I'm God. That's my thing. So my family has always been very much integrated into chiropractic and an inside out mentality. And when she graduated school, it was cool. I thought, I was BMOC on board, all this kind of stuff. And she's just going to do my thing. And that's just not what God provided. So she digs my chiropractic, but she's really so I tell everybody I'm a mechanic. I'm the mechanic in the office. That's my thing, man. Okay. But they're the smart guys. They're the neurologists. Because, the education that they get now, Bill, is different than the one that I got. Okay, man, I was hammer nail, baby. Okay, and all that stuff else didn't matter. Okay, that's what I learned. Okay, and I learned it, then got into finesse with Dr. Brooks and Nuka and orthospinalology and Grostic and all those great vector-based upper cervical techniques. And that was my path. And she has brought into another part into the practice. So she has her own patients that she adjusts QSM3, but all my patients get neurology and fascial work so that their bodies can be expanded. It's therapeutic work. It's like a nervous system that's been locked down. The human body locks down. So it doesn't just need the cast off. It doesn't just need the nervous system released and the body up and open on center. It needs that tissue helped. So they are the ones that do that. They are the smart guys in the group. They try to program the neurology. So they do some functional neurology. They do some Graston work. They're into motion. So the human body is not static and creating all that. So it's really nice. I mean, it was very difficult for a bit because I had to change.
Yeah.
They didn't have to change. I had to change, And that was difficult for me. So it changed really my whole mentality from not just a one-man show, but to a team, and to understanding that there are other things that are in chiropractic that are super beneficial to patients. As long as they get structure and their brainstem taken care of, I'm good.
Yeah.
So that's really what's happened, and it's magnificent. Actually, I love it.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So we don't practice on any days that we're all not here. Yeah, so we are a team together. Definitely a unit. And it's nice because my wife now works in the office. My younger daughter works one day in the office. And it's really turned into, we got some great jam and music that we play. And I just love to just do my thing and just light it up.
Family business. That's cool.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
It's fun.
So you mentioned QSM3. Obviously, that's where the technique that you've developed, and just I'd love for you to just share a little bit about QSM3. If doctors want to learn more about it, how do they do that and that type of thing?
Okay. Yeah, and I appreciate you asking me that. Everything that I really talked about is really what embodies QSM3. It's a complicated system. It's been damaged. What I do is I look at a whole human body, stick a full spine up from head to pelvis, and create a story that you actually understand what's happening. Okay, so I can see the trauma and I measure it. I can see the compensation and is it normal, and I measure it. Okay, I see the energetics of the nervous system and how it is handling it. And then I could come up, what QSM3 does is we look at pattern analysis of the whole global system of an alive tenseegral body. Okay, that's a big expression. Global, alive, and tenseegral. So global, we look at the whole thing. So we do a building assessment of the whole building, okay, and understand that it's trying to compensate, okay? So once we analyze these numbers, and I'm going to tell you this whole process takes me under a minute, okay? Under a minute, I could put somebody on a machine, measure about 10 parameters, and understand everything about the human body in a postural structure function way and energetics, and then how to set it up and where the access points are in the cervical region to actually release those pathways of the nervous system. Because there's organization in there, okay? So if you look at a staircase, what I do is I look at the other part is when you go ahead and make an adjustment is tensegrity. So the human body, what I notice, it doesn't behave, I'm a mechanical engineer, it doesn't behave what's called like a rigid body. It's not a brick. Okay, it's
Right.
tensegrel, especially from C0 down to the pelvis. And then we got these legs that are springs, and we got this big meatball up top, and it sits and it modulates, and the whole thing modulates to create balance. So I can measure all that stuff, know where to access it, know how to release it. And over a bunch of time, I see patterns of what people are. And there's a handful of patterns of the way people break down and the way that you access them in through the cervical region, especially the upper cervical. And you can map it and you can look at it as a giant spiral staircase that's twisting and turning going off center. It's not just here and there and there and there and there. They're non-integrated places, but it's a flowing system. So from the top of the staircase, you can get into those access points and release the nervous system. Release it structurally, the trauma, release the compensation, and you can create balance so the head then and the neck can stand on center. Okay. So that's what QSM3 is about, is measuring that global system that reacts like a tensegrel system. You can't just push it and expect it to move, because it doesn't behave that way. So these are cool things that I think so that we've really learned is, you'd want a whole system, a whole global system of the body. You want to be able to understand how it works. You want to understand how it's made. You eat Jello different the way you would throw Jello different than you would throw a baseball. It just behaves differently. So it kind of helps us go ahead and help people create, a less subluxated brainstem, a less subluxated body, which is a system under energetic stress. So by measuring it and getting it on the table and three-dimensionally mirror imaging it, okay, it incorporates a lot of different techniques because everybody's doing something awesome, okay? And then going into these access points and releasing it. It's a pre and post measurement system, but it's fascinating because I can look at somebody and say, if they say, guess what I have, as far as problems, I could put somebody on a posture IQ and I could tell you where their troubles are. It's interesting. You become the genie because you now understand where it's breaking down. You don't look at somebody and go, tell me. I can look at them and tell them because I can see where the stress is. And I tell people it's a story. Okay. And I can look at people. And so I'm sorry, there's a lot of conversation, but if I hold a brick in this arm, okay, and somebody says to me, which arm do you think is tired and hurting? It's got to be this arm, right? It's not this arm. So there's a relationship to that. You go, yeah. So there's a relation. So you can put somebody on a posture IQ and see why their sciatic is on the left-hand side, why their trigeminal neuralgia is why the right-hand side. And then taking care of those places through these accesses up in the upper cervical area. And I found that, to me, C1 is one of the accesses. Okay. It's definitely an entrance into the spiral staircase. And that's what those people that you adjust them and they go, bam, life changes. Okay. Because you just cleared out the whole thing because it's just one line clears it all. But people have been multiple damaged. And when they're multiple damaged, they need more than sometimes other access. This is what I've seen. So, I venture around the neck, and I know those accesses and I go into them and I measure them. And it creates it very fun because it becomes a full story, not just, well, we deal with structure, we deal with neurology, they're subluxated, they have degeneration, it's at L5. You can create a whole story from beginning to end using QSM3 from the damage all the way to the release and see that flow in a full conversation of all the whys and all the how it works. And that is what made it fascinating, okay, because it upped my game. As an upper cervical doctor. And I enjoy just looking at somebody and just having the pleasure of understanding what's going on, of the why. So that's what really QSM3 is about. And there are people out there that may dig that, and if they're into that, I'm here for them. And we teach classes 4 times a year. We have 4 modules. We have a certification process. We have a new website that's just about to come out within the next week or 2. So don't look at the old one. Okay, because it's obsolete. And that's what I'm about. And I'll do it as long as I can.
Nice. So the website domain, though, is it QSM3.com?
QSM3.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if they want to learn more, that's where they'll go. I mean, this will be out. The audio will be out in a while anyway. So yeah, QSM3.com. You can learn more about the technique, and if you want to go to one of the upcoming modules and check it out, and be a good thing to to get started there. So
Thank you.
hey, Doc, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Really appreciate you and
Thank you.
just all your commitment to upper cervical, to chiropractic, to people, and over the last 3+ decades. And so appreciate having you on the podcast. And what we always say on this podcast is go team upper cervical.
Go team upper cervical.